Nairobi motorists brace for tougher times as city county government announces a hike in parking fees to 300 shillings, up from 200 for sedans in the next 10 days.
Death toll from the devastating earthquake in Morocco rises close to 3,000 as villagers continue digging through the rubble with bare hands in search of dead relatives and survivors.
And in sports, Italian club Juventus provisionally suspends French midfielder Paul Pogba after he tested positive for elevated levels of testosterone.
A very good morning and a warm welcome to this edition of Morning Cafe. My name is Freddy Ndimuli. As always, we serve you the coffee as hot as it comes. I tell you, it is quite warm in Nairobi today. I think it's actually probably the warmest day this week, 15 degrees Celsius as we speak. And it promises to get even warmer to 27 degrees Celsius with 40% chance of rain. So brace for that. Stanley?
Most definitely, and I'm used to Stanley Nyeringita. I'm taking a look at today's proverb, and today's proverb says, no matter how beautiful and well-crafted a coffin might look, it will not make anyone wish for death. No matter how beautiful and well-crafted a coffin might look, it will not make anyone wish for death. That is the African proverb this morning. Speaking about matters African, this particular morning, if you probably have dreads, well, for us and Fred, who cannot have really the long kind of hair, we'll be showing you how you can actually maintain your dreadlocks and actually even have one, and the whole beauty of dreadlocks. Stick around for that conversation. But remember, this week we're marking 1 year since the Kenya Kwanza government took in. We told you the conversation definitely goes on. We'll be bringing you the sharpest of minds to discuss and chime into this particular manifesto of the Kenya Kwanza government. Fred, quite an interesting day today to actually skim through the manifesto.
Yes, we will do that definitely. But the interesting thing is that we have very nice headlines, and they are as varied as they come. Different stories. If you look at the dailies this morning and you'll be looking at them, the headlines are so different. So it means that there's so much to discuss today. But of course, because tomorrow it will be exactly 1 year since the President William Ruto took oath of office, we continue looking at his scorecard 1 year on. So definitely we'll be doing that. But for now, let's take a look at our top story. On our big story today, 1 in every 8 Kenyans aged between 15 and 65 years is currently using alcohol, with Western Kenya topping the list of regions with the highest prevalence of alcoholism in Kenya. Now, according to findings by the National Authority for the Campaign Against Alcohol and Drug Abuse, NACADA, alcohol is the most abused substance in Kenya, followed by tobacco, miraa, and bang. NACADA's national survey on the status of drugs and substance abuse also shows increased demand for cheaper and readily available alcoholic products, especially chang'aa, traditional alcoholic beverages, and portable spirits. Now, Nairobi region had the highest prevalence of manufactured legal alcohol at 10.3%, followed by Central with 10% and Eastern at 8.4%. Western region has the highest prevalence of current use of chang'aa at 11.4%, followed by Nyanza, Rift Valley at 6.3% and 3.6% respectively. Drug abuse. Well, let's take a look at the day's diary before we take a look at the dailies. Stanley?
Most definitely. On today's diary, Matters Health, to begin with the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Pharmacists and Dentists Union, that is KMPDU, is expected to hold a strike today in response to the current healthcare crisis in the country. According to the union's Secretary General, that is Dr. Davji Teller, the health workers will commence with the procession from the Kenyatta National Hospital, that is KNH, at around 10 a.m. We'll be following up on that, even in our subsequent bulletins, to see how that particular KMPDU strike will be going on and what will be said in that. And from Matters Health to Matters Telecommunications, and today begins, today is actually International Telecommunications Week, so it is scheduled to take place from today all the way to 14th of this month. And this event is set to unlock immense opportunities within the region's digital infrastructure and connectivity market. So TW Africa aims to bridge the gap between businesses, foster collaborations, and facilitate partnerships that will drive the continent's connectivity revolution, transforming the way people connect and interact. And into Matters Sports, what to expect today in the Moi International Sports Center in Kasarani. Harambee Stars will be facing Bright Stars of South Sudan in a friendly match at around 4 p.m. The match will mark the 5th meeting in history between the two neighboring countries as Kenya prepares for 2026 World Cup qualifiers, which begin in November. And all the way in Accra, Ghana, the 2023 African Paralympics Games conclude today. And Kenya has been represented by, among others, the wheelchair basketball team, which was playing against on the right strip of Daily Nation, a story that forms our big story this morning and even our question of the day. Alcohol use, addiction up in the last 5 years. This is according to a report. So more Kenyans are consuming alcohol, with 42.4% of current users addicted to it. This is according to a new report by the National Campaign Against Drug Abuse, NACADA, which also states that 3.1 million Kenyans between the age of 15 and 65 currently consume alcohol and are at risk of developing depressive disorders. Right, that is on the front page of Daily Nation. Fred, even as we cross over to the next paper, I feel like as much as we talk about the fight against drug abuse in Kenya, it should be extensive to other East African countries, because I mean, if you're going to fight it in Kenya, most likely I'll be going to Tanzania for cheaper drink or cheaper drug, or even Uganda.
And I know from where you come from, you're very close to that border with Tanzania, and we know what crosses around that area. There's a lot of proliferation of some illicit narcotics, which are always illicit anyway. So, yes. But yes, and the drug problem is what makes it to the big headline on the People Daily this morning. Revealed Kenya's drink problem. And that's the front page of the People Daily. Crisis brewing. Children as young as grade 1 are being introduced to alcohol. This is according to new findings by NACADA that paint a grim picture of growing addiction to a cocktail of drugs and substances. The report is extensively covered on page 4 of the People Daily, and it gives on the front page quite a number of statistics there, and the breakdown on how this is affecting the different regions. Leading drinkers, Western Kenya, 22.8%. I think our director Mavindi comes from that area.
Oh yes, I think in Shamahok or somewhere.
Yes, Coast region 13.9%, Central Kenya 12.8%. That's the leading drinkers. Quite a huge gap. Western Kenya 23.8%. And 3.2% of primary school pupils use or abuse tobacco, compared to 2.6% who use or abuse alcohol. So that's a big story on the front page of the People Daily. Other stories making it to the front page of a PD. Boma stocks failed to restart over 2022 poll audit. And yesterday, the National Dala Committee had scheduled a meeting at the Bomas of Kenya. That meeting did not take place. And this is according to the story, which is on page 5. It says that discomfort over the fact that part of the agenda included an audit of the election. One of the leaders of the Kenya Kwanza coalition gave instructions for the talks not to continue. Other stories highlighted on the front page of the People Daily. Detective 12 charged in 1 billion shilling fake gold scam. That's on the top strip of the People Daily. Also up there, African Union joins G20. What does this mean? Move gives continent big voice in global politics. Those are the stories covered on the front page of the People Daily today.
This even reminds me, even as we talk about the G20, G77 is coming, I believe this Friday on the 15th, and the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua will be there. But then now back to matters, the alcohol addiction and addiction crisis. On the front page of the Star, they give a very interesting bit here, and they say it is a mess and women hiring Buddhas to collect alcoholic husbands and sons. And they also break down in numbers. And as they say, addiction crisis, teens hooked to animal medicine. Okay, drug and substance abuse crisis in Kenya. So alcohol, men about 2,511,763. That is on alcohol, as compared to women, about 687,356. As compared to now in Bang, give you 475,717 men, 43,037 in women who use Bang. Tobacco, about 2 million, as compared to 287,000 roughly women. And the prescription drugs, women are leading 41,840 as compared to men who use prescription drugs, 18,000 thereabouts. Mogoka, or if you prefer Mira, 856,000 roughly men, as compared to 108,000 in women. In multiple drugs, about 1 million men, as compared to women, 188,177. Other highlights making it to the Star, the left strip. Raila Ruto Talks team receives 142 petitions. So the NDC, that is the National Dialogue Committee, spearheading the bipartisan talks between President William Ruto and Azimio leader Raila Odinga, has announced receiving 142 memoranda from members of the public. And to the Aurora and Kimura scam, state goes after magistrate in a Rotich graft case. And in County 047, Sakaja warns of evacuations in El Nino Marshall Plan. Right, and finally, on the top strip of the Star, Matters Bill proposes 10 million shillings fine for rogue hiring agencies. That is on the Star this morning.
Okay, let's take a look at Taifa Leo this morning. Same story. Nchi ya mchele na vileo, yabainika walaghai huongeza dawa za mifugo kwenye vyakula vinavyosisimua walaji. That's the headline on the front page of Taifa Leo. Uraibu, matokeo ya uchunguzi pia yaonyesha ongezeko la uraibu wa matumizi ya dawa za kulevya pamoja na zinazohitaji ushauri wa daktari. Habari hiyo iko kwenye ukurasa wa pili wa Taifa Leo. Imepewa kipaumbele na wanaendelea pale kuongeza zaidi mambo juu ya janga la pombe na mihadarati. Magharibi inaongoza kwa unywaji pombe, Nyanza uvutaji wa bangi, eneo la kati uvutaji wa tumbaku, unywaji pombe, Nairobi uvutaji bangi, utafunaji miraa, mashariki utafunaji miraa, uvutaji tumbaku, kaskazini mashariki utafunaji miraa, na pwani unywaji pombe, uvutaji tumbako, uvutaji bangi, na mengi zaidi.
Pwani seems to be leading in a number of this drug abuse.
So yes, and remember our that's our top story on TV47 Morning Cafe as well. And our question of the day: are we losing the fight against drug abuse? Are we losing the fight against drug abuse? Continue sending your feedback on that, even as we continue looking at the front page of Taifa Leo and other stories making it to the front page. Habari zinginezo, vidokezo. Mahakama pale juu kwenye gazeti la ukurasa wa mbele wa gazeti la Taifa Leo, mahakama yadumisha nguvu za madiwani. Sasa wataendelea kuang'oa magavana kila watakapo. Habari hiyo kwenye ukurasa wa 4. Kwingineko, magavana wa Raila wasema Ruto hawawezi. Wakiongozwa na Nyong'o mbele ya Odinga waapa kutoshawishika kwa vyovyote vile. Habari hiyo kwenye ukurasa wa 3. Vidokezo vingine, kesi dhidi ya Rotich sasa ya yumba. DPP amtaka hakimu anayesikiza kesi ya bilioni 63 dhidi ya waziri wa zamani ajiondoe. Kwingineko, Tundu Lissu aachiliwa na polisi Tanzania. Kiongozi wa upinzani alikamatwa Jumapili katika mkutano haramu. Na kwenye spoti, Spain yapata mboga ila Cameroon. Sharti Indomitable Lions ishinde ili kufuzu AFCON La Roja, wakialika Cyprus. Na hayo ndio tuko nayo kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo.
Katika ukurasa wa mbele wa Business Daily, 60 billion shillings loan deposit gap piles pressure on SACCOs. So distressed members continue to dip into their savings. And a number of dormant members rose from 1.22 million in 2022. So also give you a figure there, 11.8%. There is a growth in the SACCO's loan book from 686.7 billion in 2021. Other headlines in Business Daily: Ruto pushes for hustler-friendly treasury bills, bonds, trading. On the ticker, that is on the Business Daily, mobile money payments hit 7-month high on accounts growth, and the state kicks off KPA assets lease in ambitious revenue drive. And Nagel buys rival for 8 billion shillings. That is on the Business Daily.
Okay.
We can cross over now.
Tuvuke boda twende Tanzania, tuko na gazeti la Mwananchi. Habari kuu pale, Samia atema nyongo, avunja ukimya akieleza yanayomkera kuhusu uendeshaji wa demokrasia, uhuru wa kujieleza na utekelezaji wa mapendekezo ya kikosi kazi. Apigilia msumari swala la elimu ya katiba kabla ya mchakato, wadau wachambua hotuba yake. Habari kuu ndio hiyo kwenye gazeti la Mwananchi kule Tanzania. Habari zingine kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi, Lissu afichua polisi walikomficha. Na kwingineko, Profesa Mkenda, elimu ya amali na Kiingereza haviepukiki. Kwingineko, serikali haina uhakika kuwa na mashahidi. Na pia Daktari Mpango asema hatujitumi kazini, tunasubiri mlujiza ya wanabii. Habari kuu ndizo hizo kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi, gazeti la Tanzania.
And on the Citizen this morning, okay, I thought I had the Citizen here. Do you have the Citizen?
No, I haven't found the Citizen. Probably we could start looking at probably the caricature.
Oh, yes, we'll definitely try to skim through the Citizen and even the Daily Monitor as we continue. But then on page 17, that is on the Daily Nation, matters politics there. A gentleman putting up those bricks and cement on one side, speaking on matters agenda. A gentleman there trying to listen into what is happening, and on the other side, seems as if the side of the Azimio la Umoja One coalition side, the two sides of this bipartisan talks. There's actually a table there, and initially, when we were taking a look at such kind of caricatures, there was a table and they were actually listening to each other as they were talking. Right now it seems that as if there's a wall.
Yes, and we can see who's erecting the wall between the two sides.
Oh, yes.
There's someone very busy trying to put up a wall between the Kenya Kwanza side and the Azimio side, the teams that are engaging in talks at the Bomas of Kenya. I think you should just see the cartoon for yourself on The Nation, then you can tell who's who. Karakacha kwenye gazeti la Standard. And the different faces, the different fashions of the president.
A caricature that looks like him when he's donning his kaunda suit, the Masai shuka, probably just a casual, casual wear.
I don't know, but that lady looks very unimpressed.
And she's like, so which is which?
They're looking at it. She looks so unimpressed by all this fashion designs. So I don't know. That's interesting on the Standard today.
All right. This morning I go with the Daily Nation. This particular talks, I mean, so far we are yet to see the fruits of this particular talks. As Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka saying they received 142 memoranda and petitions, so we are yet to see how this particular talks will be bearing fruit, and if actually this particular wall will be brought down by the very leaders who are sitting on this table.
Well, in politics, nothing happens by coincidence, and it's very interesting when you hear these leaders say one or two things with regard to these talks. Do not dismiss any of that. On the front page of the Standard memoranda. On the other hand,
a lot of work, but yes, with a deadline, with a strict deadline though.
On the other hand, mkutano uliofaa kuwa hapo jana ulitibuka. The meeting did not take place because there were some instructions from named sources, especially from the Kenya Kwanza side. So definitely a lot is happening there. And Trust TV 47 will definitely bring you the lowdown in as far as what's happening at the Bomas of Kenya. So, we'll be discussing a lot more with my panelists later on this show. Do stand by for that. But remember our question this morning. Are we losing the war against drug abuse? You can share your feedback on our social media handles at TV47 News on X and at TV47 Kenya. That's our page on Facebook.
And they can also call in, by the way. They can also call in live on the numbers on their screens just below and tell us what they actually think about this matter. Are we losing the war and fight against drug abuse? Giving us your reasons. Remember, again, at around 8 a.m. we'll be discussing matters dreadlocks and how to, well, take care of your dreadlocks. Or if you have one of those short hairs like Fred and I, how do you grow your hair until that particular point? Stick around for that conversation.
After the break, Wakili Edward Mureo, MP Gatanga, Honorable Kasim Tendaza, MP Matuga, and Chege Majus, Secretary Social Services, PNU. Do stand by for that. You're watching Morning Cafe. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli. And we continue discussing the Kenya Kwanza Scorecard. But before we do that, there's a bigger story, and it is our top story today, the drug problem in Kenya. And our top story, just a quick run through our top story today. 1 in every 8 Kenyans aged between 15 and 65 years is currently using alcohol, with Western Kenya topping the list of regions with the highest prevalence of alcoholism in Kenya. Now, according to findings by NACADA, alcohol is the most abused substance in the country, followed by tobacco, miraa, and bang. NACADA's national survey on the status of drugs and substance use also shows increased demand for cheaper and readily available alcoholic products, especially chang'aa, traditional alcoholic beverages, and portable spirits. Now, Nairobi region has the highest prevalence of manufactured legal alcohol at 10.3%. Meanwhile, Western region has the highest prevalence of current use of chang'aa at 11.4%, followed by Nyanza, Rift Valley at 6.3% and 3.6% respectively. And today we ask, are we losing the war against drug abuse? Allow me to introduce my panelists this morning, the Honorable Kasim Tandaza, MP Matuga. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
It's great to have you in studio.
Yeah, for sure. It's a while since I was here, especially in this early morning show.
It's actually the very first time I'm hosting you, so
yeah.
It is a pleasure to have you in studio.
Thank you.
It is also the first time I'm hosting Shege Majus in studio. Karibu sana, Shege, Secretary Social Services, PNU.
Thank you so much.
It's good to have you in studio.
Thank you.
We're still hoping that Wakili Edward Mureu, MP Gatanga, will be able to join this panel, but before that, let's get talking. And even before we look at the Kenya Kwanza Scorecard, this issue of drug abuse is huge. It is, at this day and age, when you talk about more than half of Kenyans having used a drug or substance of abuse in their lifetime. And we're talking about even children as young as grade 3 taking alcohol in different parts of this country. It's been a while since the issue of drug abuse, drug or alcohol abuse became a big talking point in Kenya. We talk about the economy, we talk about the constitution, health, and other issues. Now looking at it, and the People Daily describes it as a crisis brewing. Children as young as grade 1 being introduced to alcohol. Are we losing the war against drug abuse? Let's start with you, Honorable Tandaza.
We would have lost the war, Fred, if it were not for the Kenya Kwanza government. You remember it took no other than His Excellency, the President himself, a few months back when he tasked his deputy, Rigiji, to handle the issue of drugs and alcoholism. And he's taken it seriously. He's gone around the country, meeting the relevant authorities. 2 things or 3 things about the drugs. One, it's about the adults. I'm not worried about the kids. I'm not really blaming the kids, because for them to take alcohol, it has to be brewed, it has to be manufactured, it has to be sold. Certainly, those kids as young as you are saying cannot be the ones brewing. It is the adults who are brewing the alcohol, isn't it? It also takes about the parenting, you know. So in a situation where the parents themselves, the adults themselves, take those drugs, take alcohol, then normally kids look at adults as role models, isn't it? So it would need tackling, not from the kids really, from where I sit. Counseling a kid when you are brewing alcohol, then you are taking it yourself as an adult is a zero-sum game. So the approach that the Deputy President has taken, where he's meeting the relevant authorities, and for this case, I will not even refer much to the religious leaders. We know since times immemorial, alcohol has been there in the Bible, alcohol has been there in the Quran. I'm a Muslim myself. Probably it might not be as serious for Muslims where it's totally prohibited. Of course, still some decide to take it. And in the other side where probably it's allowed, that's another debate. Certainly it can be quite emotive. But where are the relevant authorities in this? And for this one, I'm not talking about NACADA, I'm talking about the police, you see. When it comes to illegal brews and bangi and the other hard drugs, heroin, which have really been a menace, especially in coast. You know, you normally highlight mostly up-country issues when it comes to maybe just bangi. But in coast, we are dealing with very hard drugs. And we know very well, if it's hard drugs like heroin, certainly they are not manufactured in Kenya. These come from outside the country. We have all our entry points seriously manned, be it the airports or be it the ports, you see. But what happens? We've had cases where sometimes they stumble on those huge consignment, but nothing really happens until the latest case where Americans came in and dealt with the Akashas. Akashas have been living with us in Kenya. We are using Akasha, but I'm saying Akashas because certainly he was not the only one. But even when it comes to the village level, Fred, talking about the local brews, which are really a menace in central Kenya and western parts, I can tell you for sure we don't have local brews, so much of local brews in coast. It's a question of the chief, the assistant chief. You know very well we have the other layer of administration which goes to the village elder. And from the village elder, we even have wazee wa nyumba kumi. I think you even know, even in the cities, we are supposed to have wazee wa nyumba kumi in every neighborhood. Of course, it can be described differently. So when it comes to these local brews, it's local. That means they are brewed locally, where the chief is, the assistant chief is, before we even transcend to the OCS. What happens? You see, it's illegal. Everybody says it's destroying the society, but the community itself allows it to continue. Yes. And that makes it even a bigger problem. One, as I've said, the adults want to take it, they take it. Two, where you take it upwards to the chief and the OCS, who might not be taking the local brew, he takes beer, but he takes money from the local brew to buy his beer. You see, so for him, the situation is different.
Shaggy or Majus, you see,
it's a really interesting thing.
Or abuse of drugs
yes,
is seen as an escape mechanism for most societies. That probably Kenyans are going through a difficult phase, hence they're turning to alcohol. Would you agree with that assessment? That it is how tough our lives have become, that issues to do with cost of living and such, that people are turning to alcohol for some relief?
Thank you, Fred, for inviting me on the show. First, receive greetings from people of Nakuru, Gilgil constituency. That's where I come from. I was there yesterday. One thing I have to say that let's not look at alcohol as the issue. Let's look at the underlying problem, because we have a problem in the country. It's very sad when we are blaming people who are taking alcohol, but we are not asking ourselves, why does that person, when he wakes up in the morning, he just go direct to a pub to take alcohol? Does that person have another way of doing things? Or that's how we have been conditioned as Kenyans? I want to say that my friend here, Mheshimiwa, has said that was it not for Kenya Kwanza government, these menace, we were losing it. We are still losing it when they are in power. Because if you look last year and now, the increase of bangi intake, we have gone 50% higher from last year, the way it was. This year it has gone 50% higher because of the high cost of living and hard life. Most of the young people have lost hope with life. There's nothing that is coming. And I want to say the reason why even we have this discussion right now, most of these youths, when they woke up last year and other years ago, they used to have to be kept busy by government by having things like vijana mtaani kazi, where they used to unlock sewerages, wanafagia mabarabara, and so on and so forth. When this government took over, we are having a scenario whereby vijana hawana kazi. Those initiatives that used to keep our youths busy doing something, because there's no job.
So you're drawing a parallel between the Kenya Kwanza's performance
yes,
and the problem we're facing.
Yes, because what I'm saying is that these youths used to have something to do. Most of the youths in my village, when they wake up in the morning, right now when I was coming, they were telling me, when you go back, ask them, we are taking these things because we have nowhere to go the whole day. So the only this place anaenda kubangaiza ni hapo kwa Chang'aa, at least apumzishe mafikira. Because when this government took over, they abolished the kazi mtaani. They told these youths that you will be going to plant trees. Now they are going to build houses. They are living on promises. The hope itself is not there. And there's nothing wrong in society like having a hopeless generation.
Okay.
And that's what we are having, a hopeless generation. Again, these people need to be, we need to love them. We need to show them that you have not done something wrong. You can still come back to our side and do well. He has said that Rugiji has done a very good thing of fighting alcoholism. Yes, I commend him because of talking. But the empty talk cannot help our society. Okay. When the same deputy president was in Madeira, where we have a very high menace of alcoholism in Mount Kenya region, because that's where I come from, there is a chief who have been in rehabilitation center, who is trying even to come out of this alcohol menace because he found himself in it. But what did we hear the deputy president doing? He went to the public, it was a function, and he said, one of your chief here is already in a rehab. So that chief should be fired immediately. How can you fire a person who is even trying so much to come out of a problem? Instead, you should tell them one of your chief is already in rehab. When he comes out, he has gone through this journey. He knows the pain of being in such a situation. So when he comes back, he will be able to talk to the youth from the experience, from a point of, I was there, God has redeemed me. But you can't go and fire such a person in such a...
Honorable Tandaza, Shege Majus raises a very crucial point here, and I'm sure you might want to challenge it. But the fact of the matter is, handling such an issue administratively and handling the core of the problem, there appears to be a disconnect there. Because yes, you may police and bring out policemen, people, but you've not really sorted out the problem. The truth of the matter is, we are being faced by a huge population of Kenyan youth who are disillusioned due to high unemployment and inability to join tertiary institutions. That means they do not have money and they do not have employment and they're not engaged constructively from morning till evening. Definitely the problem will continue.
You see, Fred, let's go to the statistics, and numbers don't lie. And you started by saying children as young as in primary, isn't it? Or in grade 3 now, I don't know whether it's still. You see, children as young as that. And the statistics are here, I don't have to read them, everybody has this paper. The young ones, those in secondary schools, those in colleges, doing drug abuse. For those who are in grade 3, is it because they don't have employment? That is why they're taking drugs. For those who are in secondary, is it because they don't have employment? Of course, they agree, unemployment is high in Kenya. And I have no excuse to say why it is high. The previous government should have done better. I will explain what this current government is doing, you see, in terms of the issues, matters, employment. But for sure, this problem cannot just be an issue of unemployment. Look at what even Majusi said about the chief. Was the chief unemployed? That's why he went to drugs. Now he's going on rehabilitation, you see, so that now you say he should not be fired. So I agree, unemployment is there. But I don't think for whoever goes for those hard drugs, and hard drugs are not cheap, for your information, for those who have had these problems, hard drugs are not cheap. Even the local brew you are talking about at the local level, it's not being given for free. It is also being purchased. So this could be somebody who is even something to do in Juakali, but in the evenings, and then finally he goes total berserk. But initially he has some money. It's not distributed. I've never known any brewer, any local brewer who would brew and then distribute it to the unemployed people because they are not employed to take so that they feel better. There is some money. This is an industry on its own. And that is why I'm saying from the government's position, it is from those agencies. Once we get hard, from the chief, if one is a drug abuser, well and good, he needs rehabilitation, we cannot just prosecute that case here. But certainly the problem has been, we know this is illegal. The authorities take money out of these people from the top, even the main drug peddlers, we know we have drug lords even at the international level, at the national level, and they make a lot of money. But the authorities basically do nothing about it. And that is why now, from the deputy president...
Would you agree with the assessment that this should be seen or could be seen as failure on part of the current government because it is 1 year since it took office?
What steps has the government taken about this issue? If the deputy president himself, none other than the deputy president, if I've always said in other forums, even on the bigger issue of corruption, if we want to handle corruption, it has to start from State House. It has to start from the top. It cannot start from bottom. No prayers will end corruption. The same thing with this issue of drug menace. The steps taken from State House, from the deputy president being tasked to do this thing, and the zeal at which he has taken it up, I believe we are going to sort out this issue. Certainly, we cannot say there will be no local brews at all, but at least it can be brought into manageable levels. And from where I sit, it is from those tasked to do this. From the OCS, if one OCS is fired for releasing a drug suspect, or if somehow we have the Judicial Service Commission takes action against a magistrate or a judge who actually we know is known to have released or to have at least circumvented in his judgment or in her judgment on matters dealing with drugs, then that issue, the other smaller areas will take you. But for as long as people are benefiting financially, this is an industry, you see, financially from this. We are talking about the local brews, but we know about those kumikumis, those cheaper, which are actually bottled, you see. These are people who are manufacturing. They have a whole distilling plants in their homes, in their compounds, and you can't do that. You can't do that and take it out without being known by, from the mzee wa nyumba kumi, to the village elder, to the chief of that area, to the police station. This is a whole ring. So we only need to break this whole cartel, this ring, dealing with the drugs, you see.
I want to rejoin what Mheshimiwa has said, and he has asked that the kids are facing unemployment or what? I want to tell him the relationship between the kids taking alcohol is because we live in this country, and Mheshimiwa live in this country. He have seen in the newspaper before some of the parents who are unable to feed their children, and what they do is feed their children with alcohol so that they can go to sleep. It is so bad that Mheshimiwa is smiling here, and it's a scenario that we are seeing in our villages. Like, I'm a mother, and I'm unable to give my children are asking for food. That mother goes somewhere and get a changa. He gives the children so that they can sleep.
The changa for free?
I don't know where they get the changa. He can
certainly it's not for free,
so that those children can sleep.
So why not buy a packet of unga?
We are
out
talking
of the money you're
about
going
things
to
that
buy
are
changa.
happening. That these children have been initiated into alcoholism at a very early age by their own parents because of the hardship. I'm telling these people because of the empty talk they're talking. He's telling us about Rigiji. He can come here and tell us the plan that they have done with the Rigiji, with the deputy president, not just the name. I want to tell you, when this government took over, they reopened in Mount Kenya region, and these are facts, he can even Google, over 26 factories in Mount Kenya that were manufacturing cheap brews. They reopened them that had been closed down by the previous regime. Are we together? Because they are doing business with these people. But they want to talk and show Kenyans that they're doing something. But that's not true. He should come here and tell us those factories they reopened. Were those people campaigning or financing the Kenya Kwanza government during the campaigns? That's the question we should be asking ourselves, not the empty and rhetoric talks. They are telling us that they have effort, but the effort, can it relate to what is happening on the ground?
Opportunity to respond to that.
You see, I don't know why Majusi is actually double speaking. He's talking of unemployment, and manufacturing is one of the Kenya Kwanza. When you go to the plan, manufacturing is one of the pillars in the Kenya Kwanza government. You said we hold on when we come to the scorecard. And we know the number of jobs that will come with manufacturing. When it comes to manufacturing, of course, you manufacture chemicals, you manufacture anything, but there are those institutions which are actually supposed to look at the standards. So even when it's about the manufacturing of alcohol, whether it is East African breweries or Keroche or whatever, we have KEBS, we have all those other institutions, When you are talking of manufacturing, licensed manufacturing, it means this actual organization has gone through all that. It has passed the tests, There is revenue coming from that manufacturing, but mainly the jobs that come with that particular institution. What happens when you shut down Keroche Industries? How many people were employed there? And then you go back and say now people are taking local brews because they are not employed. And yet you are praising a government which actually closes farms dealing with manufacturing, you know. This is a fallacy. So the issue is, can these institutions which are mandated, if it is KEBS, if it is KEFIS, if it is any other organization, do its work so that they make sure whatever is manufactured there is up to the standard that is prescribed. Otherwise, when it comes to manufacturing, that is the way to go. If you come up with your idea that you want to manufacture some chemical which can be used as an alternative to painting, as an alternative to tammacking, that is something that should be encouraged, because that is where the jobs are, you see. But I agree, the issue of lack of jobs, unemployment, it is there. But one should also agree that the Kenya Kwanza government, 1 year down the line, the steps taken by reopening industries which had been closed, which are supposed to have been regulated, and now they are regulated, that is the way to go. Okay.
Well, the People Daily puts it on the front page as a crisis brewing. This is Kenya's drinking problem, and it is our top story today, and we are asking, are we losing the war against drug abuse? You're still watching Morning Cafe. We'll still be here with the Honorable Tandaza and Shege Majus after the break to discuss Kenya Kwanza's scorecard. Tomorrow marks exactly 1 year since President William Ruto took oath of office and became president of this great republic. And this whole week we take a look at what he has managed to achieve so far. So do stand by for that. You're watching Morning Cafe. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Ndimuli. I'm still in studio with the Honorable Kasim Tandaza, MP Matuga constituency, and Shege Majus, Secretary Social Services, PNU. And we now want to delve into matters Kenya Kwanza Scorecard. Tomorrow, the 13th of September, marks exactly 1 year since President William Ruto took oath of office and became president of this great republic. Today, we look at, and this entire week, we continue looking at his scorecard. And gentlemen, we shall be very fair to the president because we are keeping it very close to the manifesto as possible. We want to base our argument on what was promised and what has been achieved so far. So many things were promised, but if I look at the manifesto, the president and Kenya Kwanza promised to prioritize 5 areas. 1 is agriculture, 2, micro, small and medium enterprises, MSME economy, 3, housing and settlement, 4, healthcare, 5, digital superhighway and creative economy. There are quick wins, there are long-term solutions, but there were promises made that within this time, I will have done this much. One of the promises was on governance and the issue of state capture, that within 30 days, he would have set up a commission to probe issues around state capture. That never happened. The other thing was about the 2/3 gender rule. That within 12 months, he would have resolved the issue of the 2/3 gender rule and ensure that within appointments in the cabinet and in the government, at least 50% of positions in the cabinet would be left or rather reserved for women. That did not happen. Let's look at this, the 5 areas of prioritization. Majus, let's start from there. Agriculture, MSMEs, economy, housing settlement, healthcare, digital superhighway. At least the president has done something on all these 5 areas. Let's be fair to him.
You know,
say yes and then continue.
You have said he has done something. Let's be fair
on each.
Yes. But you started with a statement with the start of capture inquiry. It never happened. It never happened. It never happened. What happened? Mm-hmm. I want to know what happened. That's why I wanted my friend to start to know what happened.
Yeah.
But I can tell you what has not happened. Let's start with agriculture. I look at all the areas. Let's start at agriculture. You'll tell me he gave Kenya's fertilizer to plant maize. Yes, some of the areas were given fertilizer. You were told the fertilizer was given for free from Russia. I don't know how true is that. I saw in the newspaper that Russia has donated some fertilizers to Kenya. Some of the fertilizers were distributed across the country. We had a good harvest of maize and everything. One time I was talking to Agriculture CS, Peter Munya, and he told me the only hope that this country has is through agricultural products that we can export. We don't mind. We don't export technology like other African countries, like even Ethiopia. It's ahead of us. We only export technology like 3%. The only hope is agriculture that we can export, not the subsistence farming that we can eat. Because that is the agriculture we learned in primary school and high school that was balancing our trade and giving us foreign exchange. Let's go now to that agriculture. That agriculture is now on deathbed. I'm not talking about that agriculture in Mount Kenya region, because that's where I come from, and other regions of the country. We are looking at things like coffee. If right now you take your phone and call a coffee farmer anywhere in this country, they can tell you last year coffee was retailing from 120 shillings to 150 shillings. Right now, coffee is going for 50 shillings and below. In fact, farmers, you saw the other day last week, farmers are uprooting coffee. The only product that we can be exporting so that we can try even to look at the devaluation of our shillings. Look at things like macadamia. For the first time, you are seeing macadamias on the street. I saw even in the newspaper saying that those are people given on barriers, yeah, to relieve their pain as they try to crack them. You could have gone to bank last year and take a loan with macadamia on farm because macadamia were fetching so high, around 150 shillings. Macadamia right now are going for 20 shillings. And other products are taking over. Those are things that we used to export. And yesterday, on Sunday, I was looking at a show the deputy president had in Kirembe. He's saying that he was going to look for market somewhere, I don't know, in Cuba and those American countries. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you for sure these people, they don't have a plan on how they can help the coffee farmers or tea farmers or macadamia farmers. 1 year down the line, in fact, coffee farmers and macadamia farmers are asking, if you cannot be able to help us to improve on what we are earning, just make sure, take us back to where we were before you took over the government. Mm-hmm. That is number one in agriculture. I've told you, I've given him the issue of fertilizer that we were given by the Russian government. Mm-hmm. Number two, we go to health sector. Health sector, a cabinet secretary, Nakumincha, coming and telling Kenyans, NHIF is dead. If today, Fred, you are using NHIF, you don't have a chance of getting services in our hospitals. We have a CS, in most cases, is somewhere in Trans Nzoia, firing chiefs. That is a CS for health. And all these are the problem devouring this government. It will always come down to the engine of this government, which is the cabinet. The cabinet secretaries that William Samoei Ruto, the president of this republic, put in office is number one, people who are failing in achieving his manifesto. I want our country to succeed. I want the issue in HIV because I have relatives who are not well up, who cannot take a medical card. I want an HIV that is working. But is it working? It's not working. We're just being told the people will be deducted 2.75% for social health. This year around was around January, the 23rd, because we will tackle the president with his own words. January 23rd, 2023, he said that in 2 months or 3 months, all hustlers will have a health insurance. That even before when he was campaigning, he was telling them by December. Then he said by 3 months or 4 months. Go and look if there is anyone who having that health insurance. It's dying. And it's the same thing I'm telling you. Look at the micro SMEs and everything. As much as we cannot blame the president on everything, look at, when you talk about micro SMEs and factories and something, we are looking at ways of doing business in Kenya. If you ask any business person, even after this, because we are talking to Kenyans who are suffering, who are going through what we are saying. So I cannot come and tell you here that Kenyans is okay. We are tried. There's nothing that's being tried. Because look at our dollar right now. Our dollar, when they took over the government, the dollar was 119. And that is a fact because you can be able to Google that. The dollar has run away right now. It's 146 according to the CBK. But going to exchange in banks, it's 150 shillings. Most of these SMEs, they are not even importing things from the countries like Turkey or China they used to import. I have a friend of mine in Kamkunji who used to import his goods from China. He's not doing it anymore because he cannot be able to cope with the cash devaluation. He's going for Tanzania, our neighboring countries, who are doing even good than us. You had even the president of Suluhu, because we are talking facts. Mm-hmm. On this show, we should talk facts because we are talking to Kenyans. Madam Suluhu, who was saying the other day that he has received a lot of investors coming out of our country to Tanzania. There's a wrong list. Why are they going there if our country is doing well? Because we have instability in our fiscal policies. Today, they are being taxed this one. Tomorrow, they are being taxed this one. The other day, these taxes. You cannot invest in a country whereby you don't know next month the sum of the taxation that will come along, if they will affect you. Look at even the electricity, because we are looking at SMEs because of doing business in Kenya. Who will set a company in Kenya right now? Who will set a company in Kenya right now? Even myself, I cannot set a company right now in Kenya, even if I want to help our people. Because look at electricity last year. Electricity last year, we are talking about things like per unit, it was 21 shillings. Because we are talking things Kenyans can relate. We don't want to go to a lot of English and jargons. We want Kenyans, what Kenyans can relate. Look at, it was 21 shillings per unit. Right now, how much is it? Right now, it is that 1 shillings. The electricity has gone up twice-fold by 30%. Who will do business in such a country where electricity cost of power goes off for almost 2 days? Okay. And there is no explanation. You're telling me doing business in Kenya.
We'll come back to you. On these areas of prioritization, that's what we're doing, agriculture, healthcare, housing and settlement, MSMEs, economy, digital superhighway.
I wish we were handling one item at a time because he's gone here, there. But I wish Majusi would be having his facts right. Yeah. And as I go down to where we started, I'm just Googling here, $1 United States dollar to the Tanzanian shillings. Actually, $1 United States dollar to the Tanzanian shillings, it is 2,500 Tanzanian shillings to the US dollar. If you convert that into our Kenyan rate, you'll find the dollar cheaper with the Kenyan shilling than with the Tanzania rate. Go do your maths as I proceed on the other issues. Because
I never compared Tanzanian shillings.
Because you are saying dollars, you are saying our neighboring country here is doing so well. The exchange rate there is much manageable. They can do trade, and yet the facts are different. This is the current. I've just Google. Do your maths as we continue. So it's good to go by the facts. But anyway, agriculture. What would you start with, Fred, between providing food to the country? Because food is basic, isn't it? We need to eat before we go to work. Before we do anything, we need to eat. We realize from the previous governments, agriculture and maize being our staple food was not taken seriously. We were importing a basic commodity like food. You know, you can do without importing clothes, the quality cloth. You can do your mitumba, you can go to your charahani and do your patching. But certainly, you cannot do without eating. And that's where this government prioritized. And they got it right by subsidizing production, and we can see the bumper harvest that we got. So we are no longer going to import maize, because this one, if there is no maize, we'll have to import. There are no two ways about it. And that way automatically, it strengthens our shilling, because when we import, we don't import using Kenyan shillings, we import using dollars. So there's something like fuel, petroleum products, which we have to import anyway. And then now we go back to the basics of importing food. So this is something that the government got it right, and there are no two ways about it. Forget about the issue of subsidies, which they will talk about to bring the cost of living down. It's not sustainable. This is for a fact. Everybody knows this. So, and as he was talking, I was also looking at the cost. Okay, I'm not very conversant with the prices of coffee and tea. I was just Googling to check the current prices. I think you also got your pricing wrong, Majusi.
Yes.
I wish you can also go back there and correct yourself.
Yes.
Certainly, if you go and Google the price of coffee beans in Kenya, I've Googled, it talks about 500 shillings per kilo. You're talking about 50. I don't know which, but I've said I'm not from a coffee growing area. Maybe you have, but just Google the price of coffee beans in Kenya, what I got. But we are looking at, I agree with you, we need to export so that we can strengthen our shilling. We need to export to get dollars. What has this government done in terms of reforms in the tea sector and the coffee sector? You know, for a problem that has been there for a long time, it will be myopic to just imagine that there will be a magic wand. It's like instant coffee, one will come and change everything. But we should be able to appreciate that there's been so much done in the reforms, especially in the tea sector and the coffee sector. We might not be able to get the benefits right away within the 1 year that we are talking about, or 6 months that these reforms took. But if we actually interrogate the sectors which this government, especially those two areas, we would say that is the right way to go, you know. And as I've said, this is a problem that has been there for a long time. It's not something that started on the 9th of August when the Kenya Kwanza government was sworn in. So yes, we are getting it right in terms of food security, which is very basic, and it will eat into our dollars, to the reforms that this government has taken on those sectors. And not only on those sectors. You can see what the president did, was it 2 weeks ago when he was in Western, in terms of reviving the sugar sector, you know. So he can talk about tea and coffee because it's from Mount Kenya. But we have other sectors which have all been dealt with squarely. We are also looking during the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, the plan, if we interrogate it, even in cost, there are issues to deal with our product, the cashew nuts, the coconuts. We might not expect it to improve within 1 year, but certainly those reforms are there. And from where I sit, I know they are going to bear fruits and actually transform this country. Okay. Now, maybe so much on agriculture. The other issues which he was talking about you talked about 5 issues. There was the issue of agriculture, the health sector. When you talk about the health sector, I'm surprised that he's actually talking about the CS Health, who actually faced the KEMSA dragon head-on. You see, if with Susan Nakumicha, you remember the issue of the nets, who expected that a whole board and a CEO will be fired because of mismanaging such a... In the previous regime, you remember very well, none other the president angesema, sasa mwataka nifanye nini jameni, nitafanya nini. But within that short period, we've seen what has happened, even in the health sector, you see. When he says that you cannot use the NHF card, I don't know whether he lives in this country. All what happened, and this was reported, was that now we are going to cease using the card as it is, which people are used to, that you need to have an NHF card, to a digital platform. It's not that the universal health coverage is not working. It's not that those who are covered are not being treated, they're not getting treatment. No. So this is totally a misrepresentation of facts. Okay. And for the government to go digital, that is the way to go. Why should we stick to the old ways, which are more expensive, inefficient, you see, prone to abuse? And to the extent that we are having even one digital platform for almost all the government services. I think this is certainly the right way to go.
Allow me to introduce onto the panel Wakili Edward Muriu, MP Getanga constituency. Karibu sana. You found us right in the middle of this discussion. We're looking at Kenya Kwanza Scorecard. Tomorrow being the 13th of September, exactly 1 year since William Ruto was sworn in or took oath of office as president. And we are referring to the Kenya Kwanza manifesto and looking at the areas of prioritization. And we're saying that probably Kenya Kwanza is suffering from a serious focus or staying on script. The areas of focus being, or prioritization being agriculture, MSME economy, housing and settlement, healthcare, digital superhighway, and creative economy. Those areas were singled out for prioritization. 1 year on, we're gauging whether or not there've been some movement, at least in those areas.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. And the things which you've raised are very weighty. And what I would like to say is that as a Kenya Kwanza government, and me being the secretary, UDA party, is that we are on track in terms of the manifesto. Remember, we are taking over from the previous government, and maybe also to bring it to attention, we passed the first budget of Kenya Kwanza in the month of July this year, so about like 2 months ago. And therefore, as one tries to make a conclusion or maybe an inference in terms of the achievement, I would like to say that the budget is only 3 months old to date. That's number one. Number two, in terms of policy, preparing the government for a takeoff, I would say the first 1 year was primarily to ensure or to put in place the framework to put the country into pedestal for an economic growth. Remember, we have inherited a totally different regime altogether. We have inherited debt almost close about 9 trillion, going to 10 trillion. We have inherited a decline in terms of the dollar value against the Kenya shilling. We have inherited cost of living going up, and therefore the first job of this government was, number one, to ask itself, are we going to continue digging this hole of debt, this hole of skyrocketing cost of living, or we need to come up with policies to forestall the growth?
I have a question and I'll allow you to continue. Is it fair that 1 year later, we're still talking about inheriting whatever it is that was inherited from the previous administration? Are we saying that 1 year of this administration being in place, it is not fair to assess its performance over the 12 months?
Maybe I take you back to the Constitution. The framers of the Constitution knew very well, for national building, for you to be able to have an impact, the assessment time is 5 years. And like any government, even for you today, if you report on the same day, people don't expect you to have any result on the first day. You'll be assessed as you go along. And therefore, the government structure is very, very different. Because I remember, most of the interventions are budgetary based. And if they're budgetary based, then you need to come up with your own budget to be able to implement your own manifesto. From the month of August 2022 to almost July 2023, we were dealing with a budget which was done by a different government. And therefore, to be very honest and very sincere, this government requires, we need to just look at it or reflect on it once it has implemented its first budget. However, it's important for me to say this. Every journey starts with one step. And the beauty about it is that this government has addressed the most painful and what you can call the elephant in the room, the cost of living.
Okay. Gentlemen, and I said we were going to stick to the manifesto. Yeah. And we can see that, yes, we can give credit and give credit where it's due, that the Kenya Kwanza administration has really tried as much as possible to stick to the script, and that script is its manifesto. Yet there were promises made by the same Kenya Kwanza administration or while they were campaigning that were never fulfilled. One, and they gave timelines that were not prescribed by any other system. Because when the president took over and he said immediately he does, he will appoint the 6 judges who are yet to be appointed. He did that. The other thing he said, within 30 days, he'll form a commission to probe issues around state capture. He did not do that. He himself gave the 30 days. No one else did. He also said that within 12 months, he will ensure the issue of the 2/3 gender rule is sorted out, including, he made a promise that 50% of the positions in cabinet will be reserved for women within 12 months. The 12 months end tomorrow. That is a promise he made. It is not prescribed anywhere in law. He was not under pressure to make it.
Fred, allow me to reply what Wakili is saying. And number one, he said that they found themselves on a ditch. And the best thing to do was not to stop digging. They found deaths. I want to ask Wakili to come straight to Kenya and tell them, look them on the face and tell them that this government has borrowed more than any other regime in the same period. And I can give you figures. 500 billion on the domestic market, 800 billion on international market, 1.3 trillion that they have borrowed. But when they go to the people on the ground, because the people they talk to, they know most of these people are not conversant with this information. They tell them, Sisi had to copy. And that's why we are adding new taxes. Mm-hmm. These are the lies we are here to call out, so that Kenyans can get straight what is happening in our nation. Because we cannot bury our heads that this government, they found themselves on the ditch, 1 year down the line. They have borrowed more than any other regime in the same period. And Wakili knows that very well. But when they go to the ground, Sisi had to copy, which is very wrong. You cannot fool 50 million Kenyans and fool yourself as a person. So he should stop saying that. 1 year down the line, we are still talking about we found. Who found what? Mm-hmm. The person who is the president right now was the deputy president of the Republic of Kenya for 10 years. So coming and telling us we found with who? He was part and parcel of the system. He should say the system that was there, that was part and parcel of the William Samoei Ruto, we are continuing. And that is the trickery and the cunningness that they are also doing to Kenyans right now, that we found as if they were outsiders. They were part and parcel of the government. Mm-hmm. So let's talk the things the way Kenyans know them. Let's not try to figure things like in a euphoria, things that don't exist. They're saying 1 year down the line that now we can start judging them with now what they are.
Wakili says it should be 5 years. 1 year is too short.
Yes, it's too short. 1 year is, we're talking about 20% of their time that's gone. There's a saying in Swahili that says, siku njema huonekana asubuhi. And this siku njema, we are talking about a cabinet that the president himself says that he knows more than most of the cabinet secretaries. In fact, he was trying to imply that most of the cabinet secretaries that I took in office, and that's not the first time he said that during the signing of contract. He even said it when they were in Nanyuki, I don't know what they were doing there. Some of the cabinet secretaries, you cannot perform. There's no miracle that you can perform. If, Fred, you are the manager of this institution, and you come and tell the shareholders that most of the people I've employed, I know most of areas than them, there's no miracle we'll do to perform. What I was trying to say is that my people should not talk about the reforms. They're in parliament. Okay. They should come here and elaborate. What are these reforms? Mufisimu has said we had the reforms. Elaborate the exact reforms in the coffee sector, the exact reforms in the tea sector, so that Kenyans can understand that this is where we are going as a nation.
Okay. Honorable Tandaza, this the issue, and he has raised it.
Yeah.
The fact that Kenya Kwanza are still using, let me call it an excuse or a reason for not being able to do a few things. That they took over from another regime, another administration, and they're trying to correct a few things. For how long should we expect this reason to be given by this administration, so that at least Kenyans can be aware that at least for the next 2 years, this will be the reason why Kenya Kwanza is not able to do what
you see, Fred, I would want to go to the specifics of which you think has not been done or not been addressed. You mentioned amongst the issues on the plan is about the SMEs. The president, then the deputy president, on his campaign trail, told Kenyans, the moment I'm sworn in, I'm going to put money into came to the Hustler Fund, so that the SMEs can be able to get money and actually do business. Did that happen or it didn't? It did, isn't it? Those are some of the issues that I'm saying we need to go to the specifics. Because one of the issues which was bringing down SMEs is the availability of money, the conditions that the other lenders were trying to put, the interests that were loading into those people who are getting that money. That happened. Serious SMEs are using that fund now. It's a government fund. It is a plan, and they're benefiting out of that. That's another way of unlocking the issue of SMEs. So, I would want to go into the specifics. He said, if it is the issue of the campaign trail, we are talking about the state capture. He pronounced it on the first day at Kasarani, when he said, now, civil servants, you will not be allowed to do politics. Go do your work. From there, he said, now I'm going to have the police have their own budget so that you can do your work without any political interference, without anybody. And that is the way he's been able to handle it. You know, sometimes we are used to so much talking, and when somebody acts, now you wonder why is he not talking about it. But he's acting, and that is the way to go about it.
Well, the promise was to form a commission of inquiry to prove that.
But if without forming the commission of inquiry you found a solution, or you want you want him to create jobs for the commissioners just for the sake of it. Initially, I wanted to form a commission of inquiry to find out about this place, but I found out the answer and I've acted on it. Do I need to form the commission of inquiry? The 2/3 gender rule, and he has said, of course, we are legislators, we are in parliament. The first thing he did a letter, you see. He put a memorandum to parliament to actualize the 2/3 gender rule. But what happened with our colleagues from the opposition? They thrashed all that memoranda, you see. And I don't know why you are not seeing it from that angle. You see, otherwise, he actually took his word to action. I'm hoping now with the bipartisan talks which are going on, they should be able to prioritize
Honorable Tandaza, the numbers in Parliament speak for themselves. You cannot say the other side is able to shoot down anything in that house.
Yeah. No, you see, there are some issues which you need 2/3 majority. You know, it's not just a simple majority, you know. When it comes, like the issue of the 2/3 gender rule, this is just not an act of Parliament that you have, because the suggestions that were put there, some of those had to go to the Constitution, and I hope we know the legislative process, the way it goes. So this is something that would have been sorted if we had goodwill from our colleagues in Parliament. I'm hoping this time.
What about the 50%
I'm hoping this time.
Parliament, because I know it might just disappear.
That one is, I don't think you can read that from the plan or in the manifesto.
It is there. It is there in the manifesto.
It is
not, there on the women agenda.
It is not on the plan. But when we talk about the third, I know that is something that has to be sorted out. You see.
On the women agenda, and it says clearly. And this is a commitment by Kenya Kwanza. If I can trace it there, because it comes much lower. And it says that within 12 months, the issue of the 2/3 gender rule will be resolved in all public appointments, but specifically on the cabinet, that 50% will be reserved for women. It is in the manifesto. Why that, and I'm asking, that is a promise he made and he did not have to make it. Are we saying that some promises that were made were not necessarily accurate?
You see, we would want to go back to the basics of the law and the Constitution. I think the most critical thing, which is in the Constitution, which must be actualized, is the issue of a third gender rule, both in Parliament and in institutions. Okay. Remember, some of these institutions have been in existence, such that if you are to just say, now we need a third gender to be applied in all the positions in the civil service, two things might happen. One, you either fire men or women so that you acquire that, or you add the numbers which will add to the wage bill, which again will be an issue when it comes to running this government. So there are some issues which certainly will take time, and they will need the goodwill not only from the president himself, but from the other arms of the government. From the president, the goodwill was there. But when it comes to the legislature, that's the National Assembly, and hopefully if it were to go to the Senate, that is where the problem is. But I'm saying, for as long as Parliament is still there, now there seems to be some working relationship with the other side or in the Parliament, then these are issues that should be able to be institutionalized, and once they're institutionalized, they're legislated upon and agreed and signed into law. Given that the memoranda came from him, then we are not worried of whether he's going to follow it through or not, because the goodwill is already there from the president.
Okay.
You see, yeah.
Okay. Honorable Murio, you're the one who brought this issue of, and this has been the statement that you took over from the previous administration, which is something that happens. Transition happens after every, even from one member of parliament to another. There's always a period of transition. Are we saying that this transition period is going to take longer so that we can actually call to account this new administration and say that now we can no longer listen to issues to do with the previous administration? Now it's up to you.
I would say that state making is what you call work in progress. And maybe also to respond to my brother here, because again, that statement might go on record and mislead the public and our viewers. The art of making a budget, there is what you call the income estimates and the expenditure. And that happens in the budget and then supported by what we call the finance bill. Now, it's when the expenditure becomes bigger than the expected revenue that you project what you call a fiscal deficit. And the fiscal deficit is now the debt aspect. Now, the question here brings two issues. What was the Kenya Kwanza first budget deficit? It was about 1.1 trillion. But the president reduced it to 1.1 trillion. The president reduced it to 700 billion. Now, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say this. One, matters of borrowing, as my friend has claimed here, is controlled by the Finance Act. You cannot borrow without using the framework and the mechanism of the law. That's number one. Number two, all expenditure.
That is true across all administrations, not just this one.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
So you cannot go out and borrow out of the budget, because remember, all these budgets come to Parliament, and it's a Parliament which approves all the payments. That's number one. Number two, plucking figures in the air and throwing them to our people, to our viewers, I think that's wrong. Because, as you have said clearly, just to answer your question, there is nowhere there is what you call a stop button for the government to stop running, and another one to put a press button to start running. The government runs irrespective of who is on the RAM. Now, maybe address you on what you call domestic borrowing. Domestic borrowing, more often than not, you borrow to pay off previous debts. And all those are provided for by the finance bill. You borrow to retire old bonds and old treasury bills. That's number one. So when you pick up a figure and continue saying that we are borrowing, you need to borrow against what? It must be within the framework of an existing budget. That's number one. Number two, when you say that you are doing external borrowing, definitely the previous budget had provided for that. And therefore, when you say that there is an external borrowing, there is no way you can borrow without an approval of Parliament. And therefore, we need to be very careful when you say the government is continue borrowing. I just wanted to tell you this, that there is no what you call the stop button. The government still continue with the previous government's budget, and therefore that's why I said the Kenya Kwanza government need to be judged on its own budget.
The budget, the 2023-2024 budget is the budget you're talking about. The very first budget under the Kenya Kwanza administration. And I'm looking at parliamentary the Parliament's website, and they're talking about the borrowing space to finance this will be expected to be less than 600 billion. The amount is insufficient to finance the budget estimates, and the budget deficit, which is about 720, so 600 billion shillings to finance this budget, the 2023-2024. Yet what you're saying is that some of this borrowing was to cover for the previous administration.
Let me explain. Remember, and I've said clearly, that the government does not stop running because a new administration has come up. And there are two levels of borrowing. One, domestic borrowing. Domestic borrowing, it's number one, you borrow, to support the budgetary deficit, if it's there. Number two, you also borrow to retire old debts. And a good example, say for example, the government had maybe about, say 700, 800 billion bonds and treasury bills to retire this particular month. You need to borrow to be able to pay off those debts which have become due. That's what happens, because again, and it's revolving. All this is revolving, and therefore, my point here is that when you say that we expected a 700 deficit, and then we have a short by about close to 100 billion. What you're telling long and short is this. Our deficit, which again I said is a balance between the expected income and the projected expenditure. That's the amount. The top line is what you borrow, and you can decide to borrow internally or externally. And therefore, and what I wanted to clear here, and I think is good for our viewers, is that borrowing is a continuous process. And therefore, one does not pluck a figure and throw it on the table. It must be borrowing for what purpose and based on.
And so it is fair to say that a promise of zero debt for government is unlikely. It is inaccurate.
Just me 1 minute. The government did not say, and again, sometimes we put things in wrong perspective. There is no one time the president or even the government of Kenya Kwanza said we don't want to borrow. You cannot leave the borrowing. But the point is very simple. You need to borrow within your means. That's number one. Number two, in the previous years, the borrowing was over 1.2 to 1.3 trillion a year. Now, and why do you borrow? You borrow to plug in the deficit. What we did in this respective budget is to ensure, number one, the deficit does not go beyond 700.
Okay.
All right?
I think that point is made on the issue of debt. There's also other things that could be plaguing our country right now, but may not have necessarily been captured by the Kenya Kwanza manifesto. And we may criticize a government on failure to do some things that it never promised to do. But is it always on the promises made? At the moment, we have a serious issue with education, university funding, which is not captured in the Kenya Kwanza manifesto. Kenya Kwanza manifesto talks about education and basic education mostly. Issues of university funding are emerging issues that could be consequential to this economy as well. The fact that the new university model has come up, funding model, the fact that the new curriculum is yet to be fully implemented. Do you think that they missed out on this intentionally? The fact that education, and especially university education, was not prominently featured on the manifesto?
Fred, first, I'm happy how my friends are struggling to explain what this government has achieved. In fact, I want you to give them more time to start to explain to Kenyans, because they are going in round what the government has achieved, because there's none. Coming to that point, assuming President Mwai Kibaki took over the government in 2002, he had all the reasons to tell Kenyans that this country was plundered for 24 years. Kind to give me time. President Mwai Kibaki never even for a second mentioned about the Moi regime. Even for a second. What he did, the promises he did, he made them real. In fact, free primary education. After a week he took over, Professor George, as I told you the late, he pronounced free primary education. So you cannot give us excuse Oh, it's too early. It's what? On the promises you made. You are not at a gunpoint to make that promises. You made those promises because you wanted to brainwash Kenyans. So stop telling us it's too early or other things. We are not taking that. Number two, people have been telling them. We heard Archbishop Oresapit telling them that you overpromised Kenyans. Kindly, come down and tell Kenyans the promises you made were unrealistic. That's why they're struggling, because you cannot explain something that is already there. And Kenyans are watching as we are discussing these things. These things that are coming over of education program and everything, I have to admit that we are in university, and our universities have been having that problem for a long time, and some of them were even shutting down. But it needs a multi-level approach. People level-headed to come up with a plan so that we can get out of the ditch we are. The president should not have maybe promised, because he never knew. There's so many things that will come along, challenges that he has not he never promised. But what will judge the president? We will judge the president by the way he will tackle these issues. How many Kenyans right now have confidence with the CS education mature? How many Kenyans have confidence with it? The president himself doesn't have confidence with that cabinet. He's telling them on their face that I know, in most of the sectors, I know more than you. So the challenges we're having as a country will be tackled by the people who can be able to tackle those challenges. The reason we're having in the confusion in university right now, some of the students have applied for help, they have not gotten help, fees is 300,000 and something. All this confusion is coming along because we have a regime that cannot steer this nation exactly to where they had promised Kenyans.
Okay. Honorable Tandaza, do you think that the lack of a blueprint, especially a reference when it comes to university education, could be a problem for this administration?
No.
They had not thought about these things that I imagine now.
You see, I started by saying there is one approach of talking about something and the best approach of handling that problem. And I think that is where those outside Kenya Kwanza are having a problem, that things are happening without the much fanfare, without the commissions that they would have had. Though there was a commission on the education sector, you remember the reforms which are being implemented now came out of a task force formed by the Kenya Kwanza government. But save me 1 minute to just recap on what Majusi was talking about, referring this government to the Kibaki government. We agree, Kibaki government did wonderfully well. But when he came into being the president in 2002, Moi retired. You know, he gave Kibaki space to work. Now we are in a different time where the former president still wants to continue being the president even after he has constitutionally retired. Kibaki never faced maandamano. I think you live in this country. I think you were there by 2002.
I was born.
You were born, eh?
I was born.
Yeah, there were no maandamano in 2002. Kibaki came in, had the time to sit in State House and work. Here is the situation where 1 year down the line, some people, I believe, including himself, are still threatening maandamano in the middle of, we're now heading into the...
Are you saying maandamano has been the biggest impediment for this government?
Yes. We are saying we are facing different situations. You cannot copy-paste what happened in 2002 and say that is what should be happening in 2023 because we are facing different situations. That is one. To say that nothing has happened, look at what has now come into the issue of housing, you see. The housing projects that are being launched now, including even in my county, Kwale. In 2 months' time, we are going to actually ground break 800 units in Kwale town, something that has never happened since independence. This is not just about housing, but you should also actually look at the number of jobs that will come into that project, and it's happening all over. So for somebody to say nothing has happened, I think he really doesn't follow what this government is doing. But on matters education, which you have actually talked about, one, it came out of a task force from this government, so it's not an afterthought or it's not that it's just something being thrown around the way one would imagine. Two, the approach is the best that we can have. You know, we were having a situation whereby with the little resources that we have, even my son or my daughter would gotten the Higher Education Loans Board. He would actually gotten a bursary or a scholarship, and yet I can afford to pay, you see. So if I can afford to pay, why should I still scramble for the little resources that are there? But now we're having a situation where for the very needy, those vulnerable who can't afford will still afford university education basically free of charge. And this is happening at the universities, at the tertiary institutions. And what better education approach would you want to have in this country? Because we know we are not at the economically. There are those who totally cannot afford. Those people who are struggling, now they'll be no longer struggling.
My question is...
I know the current
issues,
is, yeah.
And my question was,
yeah.
Is it because Kenya Kwanza manifesto does not have the blueprint on how to handle matters to do with university education? Because I've gone through the Kenya Kwanza manifesto looking for university education and how to handle it, and it's not there. Is it because that was not accounted for? That's why we're having the challenges we're having today.
Which challenges are we having? For now, last week, before we went on recess, we had the CS education in Parliament. And he came out clearly that with the current funding that we are having, the universities are opening, all students will be admitted. The issue of the higher loans board and whatever will be sorted out later. There could be a few VCs who are actually going against that one, but I can assure you action will be taken, should be taken. But what can be a better way that now all university students will be admitted, and then those who cannot totally afford, they'll be paid for by the government to continue with the education. For my kid, I'll pay, I should be able to pay for my kid. So what is this confusion that you are talking about, you see?
Okay, because the question is that the president said I should be judged on my promises. I should be judged by the things I put down in the manifesto. This is what you should judge me by. But there are issues that I imagine that are not really necessarily captured in the manifesto. Is it fair to judge this administration by some of those imagined things or imagined issues that the same administration still has to handle?
Remember, a manifesto is what you call an anchor on any government which want to come in power. And remember, you're also doing that as an outsider. But when you now come to power, the reality sinks. And that's why sometimes when you use the hard fast truth that, oh, was it in a manifesto? How comes you are doing it? It was out in a manifesto. You cannot ignore a problem if you find it once you take power. And a good example is what you're talking about, the education. Remember, we inherited a CBC system of education, which was never taken through the public participation. Nobody knows why we changed from the old system to the CBC. It was hurried. And I will tell you, in the eye, it was purely meant for a commercial reason. That's number one. Now the question is...
The deputy president, when the CBC was first came into implementation, the deputy president then, and this was in the first term of the Jubilee administration, was William Ruto. Yes. He was definitely aware about...
I'm coming to the point. I don't want to just get distracted by whether he was on power or he was not. But the point is very simple. But my point here is very simple. That once you come to power and you have a curriculum called CBC and you can hear people grumbling, the first thing is to find out, okay, why are they grumbling? And you come and find out, oh, this system, first and foremost, it's being pushed through the people's throats. They do not even know where to start. You're supposed to carry things from home to go and learn in school. So, and that's why you find in the first few months of power, the government set up a body to investigate and pick up people's views and see how we can be able to harmonize with the current needs. That's number one. And therefore, it may not have been expressly stipulated in the manifesto, but it is part of the bigger framework of education and making sure that we are able to meet the aspiration of meeting the constitutional threshold of quality education under Article 77.
Okay. Now, because of time, as you make that remark, go on and make your final comments as well.
What I just want to say is that the Kenya Kwanza government is on track. And it was on track, and I'll be able to maybe trace only two issues. Number one is education. For the first time in history of the Republic of Kenya, the Kenya Kwanza government plugged in 600 billion in education. Why? Because we do realize that education is the equalizer of the poor and the rich. Number two, for the first time in history, in one financial year, the Kenya Kwanza government has been able to employ 55,000 teachers in the TSC. again, to support that education. And secondly, in the journey to alleviate hunger, the Kenya Kwanza government has reduced the fertilizer cost from 7,500 to 2,500 because we do believe that it's better to subsidize production as opposed to subsidize consumption. And therefore, what I would just ask Kenyans at large is to give Kenya Kwanza a moment to actualize its manifesto.
Okay. Thank you so much, Honorable Muriu. Wamajus?
Fred, what I can say is that one thing I can give about this government, what they have achieved, because give credit where due. They have achieved a lot in Thanksgiving and interdenomination in our churches. That they have done exceedingly, because that's what they do best. Number two, I can give them, they have achieved so much in starting our campaigns. We have a government that is on top of the vehicle. I want to ask my brothers here, because they were of age when Kibaki was ruling. They tell me the day when they saw Kibaki on top of vehicle lecturing Kenyans on what he was going to do. A government that still, now they have taken over, they are still, we have a plan, we have a plan. Kenyans are not interested, we have a plan. They want implementation of the plans. Kenyans are wishing the election cycle was 2 years so that they can kick them out. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Honorable Tafari.
You see, Fred, the deliverables, the promises and deliverables. Did we see the Hustler Fund promised, implemented, people getting money? Yes. Are we seeing the housing projects going on? Yes. Are we seeing the economic spur in terms of the special economic zones and from not only at the port, but even being implemented at the county level? Those special economic zones, manufacturing zones, yes, those are things that we are seeing coming up to spur in job creation, which is very critical, and I think we started from there. Are we seeing the issue of food, agriculture being tackled? And here, you said we wish we had more time to go into the specifics of what the tea sector reforms have done, the coffee sector reforms have done, and all the other sectors that are being done. Yes. Are we seeing the education, as we've put it, and I'm saying it, for the first time, all students who were to report to tertiary institutions and universities have reported, and they are to be admitted, and the government will sort out that. That is happening for the first time. It doesn't matter whether I can afford for my kid or it's a poor, they are all admitted. This is something that is coming out of this Kenya Kwanza government. So, Fred, it's not a question of promises anymore, you see. And I've said, you need to tell the people what is happening. Because there are people now who are going out there and saying even the fertilizer, there was sand in that fertilizer. And I don't think this person saying this actually used that fertilizer. I used it myself. And everybody who used it knows that it was the right type of fertilizer. He says that it was given free from Russia. When he was there in the last regime in the handshake, how many bags of free fertilizers did they get from Russia to say, look, during our time, we gave you these bags because Russia gave us for free. Now this time we are not there, people have been given for free, they are selling it. Please, can we be serious? Let's have this government. There'll be elections in 2027. Everybody has a right to throw himself into the ring, but the facts are there, the progress is there. It's not about promises, the implementation is there.
Okay, thank you so much, Honorable Kasim Tandaza, MP Matuga, Wakili Edward Muriu, MP Gatanga, and Chege Majus, Secretary Social Services, PNU. Kenya Kwanza Scorecard, the promises, the excuses, and the implementation. This entire week, we'll be looking at that. And gentlemen, you'll allow me to read this editorial commentary as we end this session. Now, the ongoing talks at the Bomas of Kenya between the Kenya Kwanza and Azimio coalitions are indeed a significant moment in the country's history, offering Kenyans a golden opportunity to engage in a national discourse of paramount importance. Central to this discussion is a crucial role that meaningful public participation plays in shaping the destiny of our nation, particularly on matters of national importance such as constitutional amendments. The fact that the National Dialogue Committee is currently accepting memoranda from various parties is a positive step towards involving the public in the decision-making process. It signals a commitment to inclusivity and recognition of the diverse perspectives that exist in Kenyan society. However, the key concern is whether this public participation will be meaningful and consequential. There has been a historical tendency to pay lip service to public input. Public views are often collected as a formality, only to be sidelined or ignored when it comes to the actual decision making. The stakes are particularly high when it comes to constitutional amendments. Altering the fundamental law of the land is a matter of utmost significance, and the voices of the people must be taken seriously. The concerns and aspirations of everyday Kenyans should be given equal weight alongside the agendas of political parties. After all, the Constitution is meant to serve the people, not just the interests of the political elite. Meaningful public participation is